just quickly recap. Rav Huna came along and said that there's a certain amount that we tolerate that is not perfect. So you get, 4% roughly that we expect it to be extraneous to whatever the product I'm buying, including maybe pebbles and all that. But once it's more than that amount, how much do you have to reduce it by? So Rav Huna came along and says, once you reduce it all the way to to make it 100%. And we have two possible reasons in the Gemara. One is min hadin and one is a knas. Min hadin is because I expect to receive 100% of what I ordered, but I know it's a big job to go through and sort the wheat and take out all the extraneous stuff, so the legumes, whatever we're talking about. So I'm not going to make you. I'm not going to hassle you. But once it's more than that amount, and you have to go through the hassle anyway, then might as well go through the whole lot. That's min hadin. Knas is that no. Generally, I'm meichel regardless of how much it is. But if it's more than that amount, which we assume is the general amount of tolerance, we will say possibly you deliberately mixed it in. And once I suspect that you deliberately mixed it in, then it's a knas. Then even if it's less, it's a tolerable amount. It's an amount that we normally tolerate. In this case, I won't because I suspect that maybe you deliberately mixed it in. So you want to ask two more questions to sort this out. And after the end of the day, this entire Gemara is very interesting because once we're trying to prove that it's right, once we're trying to say it's wrong, once we're trying to say that this reason is wrong and that reason is wrong, the Gemara will conclude that there is no conclusion. So we're up to the Gemara, 3 lines on the top of the page, Tzadik Hey Amar Aleph. So we learned previously the laws of Einah. In the laws of Einah, we learned that up to a sixth is expected to increase. That's your profit margin that we allow. If it's exactly a sixth, there's machlekes. We had a big machlekes in the Gemara and Hazov there, what the rules are, but this is the final outcome, as Rava says. If it's exactly a sixth, you have to reimburse me. But how much do you reimburse me? The money, not just to reduce it to below the sixth. Once you've increased the margin by 16.5%, roughly, you have to then bring it right down to its full value and give me back all the money. And if it's more than a sixth, then the deal unravels. So we see from here that once you have to reimburse, it's not sufficient just to reduce it. You have to go all the way back to its original principle. So it proves or corroborates Rav Huna's din. Says the Gemara, Toshma, come in here. When it comes to cheating, pachad is less than a sixth, nikna. It's a valid deal. It's a valid deal. If it's more than a sixth, the mekach unravels, there's no deal anymore. Shtus, if it's precisely a sixth, Connor, the deal remains valid, but you have to return not just that little bit of excess, but the entire Reino. Go back to the original value of this particular object. Amai, according to Lehede, why don't we just reduce it? Why don't we just reduce it, bring it back down to less than a sixth, and that's it. Shmamna, doesn't this prove, once you have to return it, then kulin med, you have to return it all. So this supports what Rav Huna said. Says the Gemara, you cannot compare, it doesn't prove anything, because I know it's very different than our case when you mixed in dirt, soil, and legumes into the wheat. Why? That I bought something for $100. I expect to get $100 worth of merchandise, whatever the merchandise is. But so how come if it's less, if it turns out to be that you're not getting really 100% of the value, there's some profit margin there as well? Why is that all right? People generally are not that familiar with the exact value of the product, and therefore I don't even know that I'm not getting my full value. So therefore, I said, I think I'm getting my full value, and it's good enough. If you raise the margin, the markup by a sixth, people are already aware that you're overcharging. It's therefore, I'm not meichel anything. I want my full value, and therefore you have to reimburse the total amount. And yes, it's a mekach torosu, bottle mekach, and the whole mekach falls apart. Mashengen over here, this is something totally extraneous to what I'm ordering, and I can see that. So the laws are very different, and maybe over here, I expect that you should have a certain amount of other things there, and therefore maybe you don't have to pay me back the whole amount. Maybe just reduce it a little bit, You just bring it back down to the amount which I expected to receive. 4%, let's say, of extraneous material, and life moves on. So it doesn't prove anything from, you cannot prove, bring any similar from Anah to our din here. So Toshma, the Gemara will exhaust one last attempted proof. My job is, I'm a botanist, whatever it is, I plant trees, and I plant trees. With Tzadik Hey Amid Aleph right before above the two dots. Last proof to try to support Rav Huna. And once you have to reimburse, you reverse everything. If you receive a field, my friend, Lita, my job is to plant trees. We learned before that 10 saplings, a field of trees is 10 saplings per saw, per 50 by 50 amos. Or if it's large trees, 3 trees per saw. So I accepted a job to plant 100 trees. You expect to find 10 barren trees amongst 100 trees. Not every tree is going to grow. Now, truth be told, you won't realize it until a few years later whether the tree is barren or not. It takes time for it to grow. And so, nevertheless, I expect 10. If I find that 11 trees, then you have to fix it up. How many to fix up? We don't just say, okay, 11 trees turned out to be barren. You have to replant at least 1 tree to bring it back down to 10. We don't say that. We say that you have to replant the entire 11 trees. Doesn't that prove that we restart again? Amar Yeshua, no proof of that whatsoever. Why? Because kol yesemekan kibolita mitchil dami, and that is as follows. What Taisa explained, and that is that we don't realize that is we don't realize that a tree is barren until a while later.
Can you mute your phone, Moshe?
Sorry, guys.
Okay. So therefore, it's constantly a work in progress. And the moment you have to go back to replant the tree, which means you still. What happens if I started planting these 100 trees, and I realize while I'm planting it that these seeds are not going to work? I put it in the ground and everything else. I covered it, and I realize an hour later, while I'm still there working, that it's not going to work. I can't just say, "Well, I'm allowed 10 trees." I have to pull it out because I'm still working, I'm still planting, and plant a new tree here. So once I have to go back for the 11th tree, it's as if I'm still in the process of planting trees. If you're still in the process of planting trees and you realize some of them are no good, you have to replant them, the whole lot. The Rambam is a little bit differently, but the same idea. Okay, now starts a new sugi in the Gemara. The Mishnah said the following. So first we talked about if you sell, how much you expect it, if you buy something, some merchandise, you expect it to be 100% perfect, or you expect that some of it might not be perfect. So then the Mishnah continues about a seller of wine. The Mishnah says we're going to learn there's 3 possibilities that a person can say. I can say martiv shel yain, a seller of wine. I'm selling you a cellar full of wine barrels. So what do you expect? So the Mishnah says you expect that 10 of those barrels are about to, starting to become a bit off, and they don't have much of a shelf life left. But if I'm going to drink it straight away, it's all right. But if I plan to leave it around for a while, it's not going to work. I expect 10% to be foul. And that's what the Mishnah said. So the Mishnah said martiv shel yain. But we're going to learn there's 3 possible scenarios. One is you say martiv shel yain. I don't specify what kind of wine. One is I say martiv zeh shel yain, this seller of wine. By me saying martiv, I generally expect it should be full of good wine, good quality wine. By me adding the word zeh, this particular seller, I'm telling you sort of, that it's limited to whatever is here. So you might not get 100% good quality wine. So zeh sort of tempers the martiv. And the third way is I just say martiv. I don't even describe it as wine. I just say whatever's in the cellar is yours. As we'll soon see what the outcomes of each one of these cases are. Says the Gemara, the 2 dots. Hey, Chidami, what exactly happened here? What did he say? If he said to him, so our Mishnah says we tolerate 10%. You expect 10% not to work, to be off. Says the Gemara, Martav Shayain. Hey, Chidami, if he said to him, Martav Shayain, Stam, I'm selling you a cellar full of wine. Kasha, I got a problem. You allow 10%. We'll soon see in the Brisa that we allow 0. If I say Martav Shayain, you expect 100% good quality wine. Okay, so if he said to him this particular seller of wine, without describing what kind of quality it is, so our Mishnah says that what you anticipate 10% should be foul and no more than that. Cash, I got a problem with that as well. As we'll soon see in the Bryce, if you said Martiv Zeh, then even if 100% of these barrels of wine are about to go off, too bad. I said this seller. This is what you have. You know, and Ida Malay. So that's a problem with the Mishnah. And if he said to him Martiv Zeh, if he deleted the word, or omitted the word yayin, just said this seller, then even if it's chaymitz, kasha, even if it's 100% vinegar, it will be a good sale because I didn't describe anything in the cellar. Now the Gemara explains what the problem is, which I just told you. Tanya Litni Bryson. This is Bryson number one. If I said Martiv Shayayin Martiv of wine, no yayin shikuli, I got to give you 100% good quality wine. Because I didn't say which particular seller, I just said a seller of wine. In that case, you expect it to be 100% good. And the Martiv Zesha Yamloch, if he says to him, this particular Martiv of wine I'm selling to you, then the Braisa says, 100% of the wine can be wine that's sold in the store. Wine that is generally sold in the store, people come in and they drink it straight away. So even though it's about to go off, it's not really an issue because you're going to drink it straight away and pretty much straight away. And it'll last for a few days. So why? And our Mishnah says that you only anticipate 10% to be foul, and yet the Braisa says in Martiv even 100% is sort of about to go off. It's still all right. Okay, and if he said so, different our Mishnah can be talking about that case. And if case number 3, if he said Martiv Zeni, he omitted the word wine, he just said this particular seller, then I feel a cooler that even if it's 100% vinegar, it's valid. I just said whatever's in the cellar. I didn't describe what's in the cellar. So what's the pshat in our Mishnah? Says the Gemara, the first attempt of the Gemara is to amend the Brisa. Our Mishnah is talking about, he said Martiv Shel Yain without describing, without delineating which particular seller. He just said Martiv Shel Yain. The Brisa says 100% has to be good quality. Our Mishnah says 10%. But Tani Bereisha, you have to amend the Reisha the Brisa, amend the beginning of the Brisa. It doesn't mean 100% good quality. Add in the Brisa, fill it in. That the Brisa, when you say Martiv Shel Yain, a seller of wine, you're allowed up to 10% that the wine is about to go foul. Okay, so we amend the Brisa now. The Mishnah and the Brisa are basically saying the same thing. Says the Gemara, okay, well, let's continue analyze the Brisa over Stam, mi mekabel. So you're telling me that Stam, you said Martiv Shel Yain, I'm prepared to accept 10% is inferior quality. Let me ask you a question. But Tani Rabchia learned, somebody sells a barrel of wine to his friend. If he said, I'm selling you a barrel of wine without saying Zeh or whatever, it has to be 100% premium quality. And you just said that if I say Martiv Shel Yayin without the word Zeh, I'm prepared to accept 10% poor quality. So Gemara says there's obviously a fundamental difference between a cellar full of barrels and one particular barrel. If I'm talking about a cellar full of barrels, okay, a couple of barrels are no good, but the rest of the barrels are perfectly all right. But if it's all in the same barrel, and part of that barrel, let's say the bottom of the barrel, the top of the barrel, let's say already is a bit acidy or fizzy or going off, then eventually the entire barrel will go off. But that I'm not prepared to accept. And that's a different case altogether. Says the Gemara, Shiny Chavez, the case of Rabchia, which is talking about one barrel, the Kula Chad Chamru, it's all the same. And part of it is foul, and the rest of it will become foul in a very short time. Everyone agrees then that it's not valid. Well, that has nothing to do with the case of our Mishnah. Okay, so that's Brisa number 1. Now the Gemara will introduce Brisa number 2, which seems to contradict Brisa number 1. Says the Gemara, Martiv Shel Yayin ani moichelo. If a person says Martiv Shel Yayin, again, this is like case number 1 in the previous Brisa. A Martiv of wine I'm going to sell you. You have to give 100% premium quality, which is the same what it said in the first Brisa before you amended it. Case number 2 is the problem. The first Brisa says if he says Martiv Zeh Shel Yayin, if he says the word Zeh, the first Brisa says you're only prepared to accept 10%. The first Brisa says then even if 100% of the wine is sort of ready to go foul, in other words, it doesn't have a long shelf life, it's good enough. And the second Brisa is going to say if you said Martiv Zeh, this seller of wine, and Umekabel all of eser kaisel you only prepared to accept 10%. Second Brisa said that even though you said martiv zeh, this seller, nevertheless, you're only prepared to accept 10%. Zehu, and this is the case of oitzer sheshonu chacham yeshasenu, and this is our Mishnah. Before previously you said our Mishnah is talking about martiv shel yayin, and you amended the Brisa. The second Brisa says that our Mishnah actually is talking about martiv zeh, this particular seller of wine, but we don't agree with the first Brisa that says if you said martiv zeh, even if 100% of the barrels they don't have a short shelf life, it's still a valid sale. No, we hold the Mishnah is like the second Brisa that says that only 10% is acceptable. So what's going on here? Elo says you're right. We don't have to amend the first Brisa. Let's go back to the way the first Brisa said that if you said martiv shel yayin, you expect 100% premium quality. Our Mishnah is talking about a case where you said martiv zeh. Because you said martiv zeh, and according to the second Brisa, we only allow 10%. Elamasis now we don't only zeh. So they want to fine. We have a problem between the previous version of the Brisa and Abzvid's version of the Brisa. In the previous version of the Brisa, martiv zeh, you allow up to 100% of the barrels about to go foul. In the Abzvid's Brisa, if you said martiv zeh, we only allow 10%. How do you reconcile these two Brisas? Now the Gemara introduces a new variable. Sometimes you buy wine and you don't need it. A short shelf life is good enough. And sometimes you buy wine and you need a long shelf life. For example, if you say I'm buying the wine for cooking, you're not going to use all the wine up in one day. You're going to use it if, every time you add a little bit of wine to your food, to your meat, or whatever you're adding the wine to. So that's tantamount to saying I need wine that's going to remain good quality for long periods of time. If you don't say lemikpa, if you don't say I want to use it for cooking, then a short shelf life is good enough. Some people will buy it for long, but some people will buy it for short. So the Meicher can always say, I thought you just needed it to drink for Shabbos or for a few days. So the Gemara therefore says the following. That's how we can reconcile the two Brises, and as follows. Harder Amalele Mikpa, Rabbi Zvid's Brises talking about where you said, I want a long shelf life. So even though he said martiv zeh, this martiv, you understood I need wine that's going to last for a long time. Up to 10% I'm prepared to accept, and no more than that. But the first Brisa that says that even if 100% of the wine has a short shelf life is good enough, he didn't specify. The lokeach didn't say, the buyer didn't say I'm buying it for long term, and therefore the vendor said, I thought you just needed it for having a big wedding or a simcha or for bringing or something, and therefore the sufficient. You have enough wine it'll last for a few days. That's how we reconcile two rices. Dear Rabzid, Bryce, I want to use it for food. And Bryce, the first Bryce said, didn't say I wanted to use it for food, therefore I don't need a long shelf life. And therefore 100% about to go foul is good enough. Hilkoch, Martiv Shel Yayin. If let's say if you have a martiv of wine, if he said to him, I'm giving you a martiv of wine, and he says, I want to use it for a long shelf life, you got to get 100% good premium wine. If he said martiv zeh shel yayin, but if you added the word zeh, which basically you're limiting, you're putting a cap, you're saying what's inside this particular cellar, and depends now. If he said I need it to use it for cooking, so I need it long term, then I have to give him 100% premium wine. But the buyer is prepared to accept 10% that's about to go foul. But if you say, look, I'm going to sell you this wine cellar, and the buyer did not say I need a long shelf life, then he's accept even 100%. You can sell wine that sells in the store, which I told you is people buying small quantities, and they pretty much drink it straight away. So now we're going to have an interesting argument. What about the case if he says martiv shel yayin? Does it matter? So the Gemara just spelled out. If he said martiv shel yayin without adding the word zeh, I'm selling you a cellar of wine. And we just said before, and the buyer said, I need it for long term, then he expects 100% premium quality. What happens? The buyer didn't say anything. Didn't say I need it for cooking purposes. The seller says, I'm selling you a cellar of wine. In that case, Does it have to be 100% premium wine with a long shelf life? Or because the buyer did not say that I need it for cooking, maybe 10% foul is also good enough. That's going to be an argument in the Gemara, depending which brisa is the primary brisa, the first or Rabbi Zvid's, as the Gemara will explain. Now, just remember, Rabbi Zvid's brisa, we learned case number 2 is talking about that he said, I need it for cooking purposes. That's why Martiv Zeh only accepts 10% foul. In the brisa number 1 is talking about, this is how we reconcile the brisa, it's talking about that the buyer did not say I want it for cooking purposes, and therefore Martiv Zeh Shayayin, this particular seller, he accepts even 100% that's about to go up, as long as it has a short shelf life, it's good enough. So now the question is going to be, since case number 2 of both brises are very specific. In Rabbi Zvid's brisa is talking about, he said, I want to use it for cooking purposes. In the first brisa, it does not say I want to use it for cooking purposes. What about case number 1 in both brises? Case number 1 in both brises are a martif of wine without saying the word zeh. In Rabbi Zvid's brisa, is it only limited to, he said, I want it for long term, I want it for cooking, only then do we say I want 100% premium? Otherwise, I'm accepting less. Because in brisa number 1 is talking about he did not say I want it for cooking, and still the first din is, as we just now decided, that martiv shel yain up to 100% has to be premium. So that's what the Gemara is going to argue. Says the Gemara, martiv shel yain, let's say a martiv of wine, but did not add I want to use it for cooking purposes. My plea, but there's an argument between Rabbi Acha and Ravina. Chadamona says Mekabel, if he did not say I want to use it for cooking purposes, in other words, even a short shelf life, then he accepts 10%. The Chadamona Mekabel, one says no, he does not accept 10%. Manda Mekabel, the one who says that he does accept 10%, Dayik Midrab Zvid. He learns that the primary price is Rab Zvid. If Rab Zvid's second case, when he said Martin Zeshayain, we said before, it's talking about what he said, I want it for cooking purposes, and that's why he accepts 10%. So in Zvid's price, it's all talking about cooking, long term. So the first case is also long term. And the Tony Martin Shiani Moichlov, when it says there that you have to give him 100% premium wine, it's talking about when the buyer said, I need it long term. That's why in case number 1, it's 100%. In case number 2, 90%. In other words, when he said zeh, whatever's in the cellar, he prepared to accept 90% premium wine. But in case number 1, when he said a seller, he wants 100% premium wine. Because Zvid's price is the main one. Well, Kimna, we said, Zvid's price talking about when he said, I want it for long term, for cooking. So time the only reason why he expects 100% premium is because he's using it for cooking. If he did not say the mikvah for cooking, then he is prepared to accept 10%. If that brisa is talking about everything in that brisa. If case number 2 is talking about cooking for long term, case number 1 also is talking about the same thing. However, the one who says that that he does not even if it did not specify I want a long term. In a case where you said I'm selling you a cellar of wine, all of it has to be premium quality because he learns from the first brisa. In the first brisa we learned, it's this case number 2 is talking about we did not say I want it for long term, and that's why if he said zeh, the entire cellar can be wine that's about to go off. Since that second case in the brisa is talking about where he did not specify I want a long term, we're going to assume the first case in the brisa is also talking about the same scenario, where in the same circumstances, I don't want it long term, and nevertheless, the brisa says, yeah, he expects good wine, 100%. It has to be premium wine. We said that case number 2 is talking about the loy amalek. We didn't say I wanted to eat it for cooking, and therefore, that's the brisa. The only problem is, how is each one going to learn the other brisa? Because the fact is, the other brisa doesn't seem to be saying the same thing. The Gemara now spells it out. The one who learns that the main brisa is Rabbi Zvid's brisa. Then Kasher brisa. How is he going to learn the first brisa? You tell me that in Rabbi Zvid's brisa that says that only if he said I want it for cooking long term, and the seller said I'm selling you a cellar, only then do we say it has to be 100% premium quality. Yet the first brisa is talking about a case where it's l'chayda, that he did not say I want it long term, and still the first brisa says it has to be 100% good quality. How do you reconcile that? So he says, no, I'm going to amend the first brisa. Studi mechsa, a few words are missing. Just like we tried to amend it before, even though we changed our mind. Now we're trying to amend it again. This is how you learn it. When is it talking about the Amalele mikvah? That's talking about when he said, add this clause in the first case of the brisa. When we say that if I said I'm selling you a cellar, I expect yayin yofa, I expect good hundreds of good wine, provided, now this is what we're adding in. The amalel mikvah, he tells you I want a long term. Hello, amalel mikvah did not say I want long term. Make kabel, he expects 10% to be foul. Exactly like the second brisa. We just add those few words. And the case of Marta Zeshel Yayin, and in the case number two, it said Marta Zeshel Yayin, and he did not add those words long term, even short term, then 100% of the wine is about to go off. Good enough. He's selling wine that sells in the store where people drink it, pretty much straight away. Now, so you want to find the other view, the other opinion, who says that I learned the first price is the main thing. That if he did not, even though he did not say I want a long term, if you said you're selling him a cellar of wine, it has to be 100% premium quality wine. So how are you going to learn that? Amalek, he said to him, sorry, well, man, the Daigabraise Kasha, the Kasha of Zvid, isn't it a problem, Razvid's Braise, where there clearly it seems to limit the din that it's 100% good quality wine is only where he specified I want a long term. Lukina Damala Mikva, Allah Amalai Mikva sound like from Razvid's Braise, if he did not say I want a long term. Bekabo, he expects 10% to be not premium quality. Says he want to know. This particular Amida would say who had did it really makes no difference. In a case where he said, I'm selling you a cellar of wine, I don't care if you said you want a long term, the buyer said it didn't say long term, he expects 100% premium wine. In case number two, Rabbi Zvid's price, we said it's limited only when he said I want a long term, when he said Martazeh. But how do you give me the the kasha says that that's only limited to that case. Could we had a problem, a contradiction between the two prices? So we answered Rabbi Zvid's price is talking about where he said I want a long term, and therefore Martazeh only allows you 10%. But what does it have to do with the first case? The first case of the price is not talking about a case where he said I want it long term. You just said you sell me a martav shel yayin without saying the word zeh. Therefore, I expect 100% premium wine. Second one further, we said Yehuda. Yayin hanimke bechanus, wine that's about to go off, that's only short term, still mevorchen labari priagafen. They still make a bracha bari priagafen. Okay, you still make a bracha bari priagafen. Says Rab Chizda, he says gabe chamra de akri. He says wine that now this is what we're going to talk about. You have wine where the wine tastes like wine, but you smell it, there's a smell. It smells like it's about to go off or it's time to go off, but the actual taste is the taste of wine. And the question is, what bracha do you make then? What's the most important part of this of wine? Is it the taste or is it actually the smell? I mean, the connoisseurs, they always smell a little bit of wine before they drink it. But what is the main thing of the wine? The taste or the smell? So he says, so Rabbi Yehuda said that wine sold in the store, which is very poor quality, you still make a bar pragaf. Even though shahakol b'dieva is good, but you're supposed to make the best, the main bracha, which is bar pragaf. Says comes along with Chizda says no. The akrim lamali. Why would you make a bar pragaf on wine that's about to go off? I would make a shahakol. And we're talking about wine that has a smell. It smells a little bit like vinegar. You smell a little bit acidy, but if you taste it, you don't taste that vinegar. It's still only wine. And we're going to learn it takes 3 days from when it starts smelling off till actually the taste goes off as well. There's a 3-day duration of before it actually happens, as we'll see. Second one, I'll ask you a question. I'll ask you a question. It says, "Alapashi, I've read that, but that when it became stale, wine that now sort of went off and has a bad smell, or a cooked item that sort of decayed. You make a shahakal. Isn't it clear you make a shahakal? You don't make it. You don't make them the special bracha priyagofen and eights and all that. That bracha is for a premium product. This is inferior, so you still make a bracha, but shahakal is a generic bracha that applies to everything. So therefore, it's not positive enough to make the special bracha. So the and Rabbi Yehuda said, "You make bar priyagofen. Isn't that a problem?" Rav came along and answered. that Rabbi Yehuda's moide, that this particular case we're talking about over here is not a case where the wine, just had a bad smell, but it still tastes like wine. This price is talking about bepurtzma, really bad wine. And this is why the David accounts, even stores would not carry this wine. Even stores, because they know you only have a couple of days shelf life, 3 days when it starts smelling up. They wouldn't sell this. Talking about store, that the only place you get in the black market or in the street corners where they sell all kinds of junk. And there you have to like drink it straight away, or people not even particular. They're dying for a drink and they'll take it. And there, Rabbi Yehuda's moide, you don't make very pregoff, and it's not premium quality, just make a shaka. I'm going to buy Rabbi Yisrael, Rabbi Yehuda, Rabbi Chizah, we have two opinions here. Rabbi Yehuda says very pregoffen, where the smell is off. And Rabbi Chizah says, Rabbi Yehuda says, and Rabbi Chizah, you make a shaka. So tell me, Mar Keman Svidla, who's right? Who do we follow? Do we follow Rabbi Yehuda make very pregoffen, or Rabbi Chizah make a shaka? Rabbi Yisrael says, Masniti Yidain out. Let me tell you a brisa, but Rabbi Yisrael does not say what the conclusion is. And it goes as follows. The Tanya, we learn, you have a bunch of barrels. And of course, you have to give truma, you have to give meiser. And so you have one, you set aside one barrel, and you say, you know what, this barrel I'm going to use to set aside truma for all the barrels over here. I'm going to, take the 2% for truma and then 10% for meiser, and so on. And what happened was, and this is going on for a couple of months. And then at the end, suddenly you realized that the wine in this barrel was vinegar. It was vinegar. So the question is, what happens retrospectively? That means because vinegar is not wine, it's a different product, and it's not valid truma or meiser. So what do we do now? How far back do we go? And we say, hey, if it's vinegar today, it might have been vinegar back to day one. Everything that you said that you drank it or you set aside thinking that it's no longer tevel. What do you do? So you must look at this. Time you learned how about you inspected a barrel, truma. You said you used this barrel for the truma for everything else. And later on you found out it's vinegar. So the Brisa says the following, a bit cryptic. Kol gimul yamim vadid. 3 days are certain. Now we don't know what it means. Does it mean the first 3 days was definitely wine? Anything beyond that is a suffix? Or does it mean the last 3 days, now that you tasted vinegar, is definitely vinegar, and anything before that is a suffix? Which one is it? The kavel suffix, and here on in, it's a suffix. My comma, what's he saying? We're going to have an argument between Rabbi Yechon and Rabbi Shmuel Levi. Rabbi Yechon says, this is what he says. Kol gimel yom rishayim, in the first 3 days, vada yain. The first 3 days, there's no question about it. It's definitely wine. Mekan ve'elech suffix. But beyond that, it is a suffix. It takes 3 days from when the smell goes off until it eventually the wine itself turns into vinegar. So whatever you set aside those first 3 days, it's definitely, even though, it's possible, as soon as, you took a whiff, everything was good. Could be 5 minutes later, the smell starts to deteriorate. But so what? It takes 3 days before the wine itself deteriorates. And therefore, anything you did those 3 days is definitely no longer tevel. It's after 3 days that we don't know what happened. So you don't have to do anything. You don't have to give trum again on whatever you set aside for those 3 days. And we'll explain the second one. And beyond those 3 days, we're not sure what the story is. However, my time, what's the reason? Where does wine start going off? From the very top of the barrel. So you smelled it, everything was good. When you set this barrel aside, you said, I'm going to use this barrel for truma, then you close the lid, you smelled it, everything was good. That could be 5 minutes later, it started to go off. So at the time, if everything smelled good, that means the entire barrel of wine was good. And because if you're going to say that the wine on the bottom is where it starts deteriorating, then just because you smelled the top and was good, how do you know the bottom was good? Then how do you know? Then even the first days is a suffix. So we're saying now that when the wine deteriorates, it starts going foul from the top and works its way down. You smell it right, all right. And then the high teime, my time wine goes off from the very top. The high teime, and over here you smelled it in the beginning, it was all good, nothing was wrong. What's the problem? Maybe basa the time as soon as you finished smelling it, 5 minutes later, it started to go off. So the smell maybe became vinegar. But it takes from the smell until in the beginning, it tastes like wine. It takes 3 days before the wine itself is transformed into vinegar. And if the smell is off, but the taste is wine, it's still considered wine. In other words, like Rabbi Yehuda, that you still make a bar priagafen, even though the smell is vinegar. That's Rabbi Yechon. And Rabbi Shimon Levi says, no, it's the other way around. He says, Kol gimul yon machrein v'adachemitz. Okay, it's 2 weeks since you smelled it. There's no question. Now that you found out it's vinegar, the last 3 days is 100% vinegar. Is that a suffix? It's 100% vinegar. Anything you set aside the last 3 days, you have to redo the truma, make the bracha and everything else because nothing happened. Mikanal halal, going back before that, suffix. And what's his logic? My timer. First of all, chamra mitatoyok. First of all, wine starts deteriorating from the bottom. And that's not relevant to this argument, but it is, as you see in a second. The wine deteriorates from the bottom, so just because you smell the top and it was all right, doesn't mean that the wine already wasn't spoiled. The Amor Ukr, it could be the wine already was spoiled, you had no idea because it started from the bottom. But apart from that, I'm going to argue with Rabbi Yochanan. Why? Even if you want to grant Rabbi Yochanan and say that he's right, that it starts from the top, and you smelled it was all good. Now, what are you going to say? Possibly it was vinegar afterwards, but that doesn't worry us. Doesn't concern us at all because you have 3 days before the wine is transformed, and you say a smell of vinegar and a taste of wine is technically wine. But I say differently. I hold what the ime. You tasted Valyaka, right? You tasted, everything was good. But what I'm worried, Dilma Basa Time, after you tasted, Okar, after you tasted it, no longer is wine. The have reicha chola, and it smelled like vinegar, v'tamei cham, it tastes like wine. And you argue that that's still wine. I don't agree. The reicha chola, v'tamei chamra, if it smells like vinegar, but it tastes like wine, chola, it is vinegar, like Rav Chizah says, and you make a bracha shahak. We're just in the middle of the brayso, have to finish this for finish the block. The Ramai, the people of Rome, when they said over what Rabbi Shimon Levi said, they had a different version. In their version, Rabbi Shimon Levi was pretty similar to Rabbi Yochanan, that technically it's considered wine if the smell is vinegar and tastes like wine, it is wine. And they learned as follows. They say the first 3 days vada yain. The first 3 days is definitely wine. Acharonim, the last 3 days is vada chaymis. The first 3 days is definitely wine. Sounds like why is it definitely wine? We don't care about the smell, right? What are you worried about? Does it not smell like vinegar? It's 3. Nevertheless, it takes 3 days for the wine to transform itself to become vinegar. What do you call it? Achrein, but the last 3 days, vada chaymis, is definitely vinegar. The last 3 days is definitely vinegar. And why is it definitely vinegar? Because it takes 3 days for the wine to turn into vinegar, and if this and it's the smell that's the main thing, and the smell smells of vinegar is like vinegar. Contradiction. And tzayim suffix. The middle 3 days is a suffix. In other words, you have to redo the truma, but no bracha. It says, you contradict yourself. Amrit, first you say Rishonim Vada Yayin, the first 3 days definitely is wine, because even though the smell is vinegar, I don't care, it's the wine, the taste that counts. Like Rabbi Yehuda, Alma Reicha Chola, B'Tama Chamra, if it smells like vinegar and tastes like wine, Chamra, it's wine. And then Vahada Amrit, and then you say Acharonim Vada Chemes. Then you say that the last 3 days is definitely vinegar. I maybe became vinegar 5 minutes before you open it up. No, because it takes 3 days from the smell of vinegar to become vinegar, and the smell of vinegar makes it already vinegar. Like Rab Chizah Shahakal, Alma Reicha Chola V'Tama Chamra. If it smells like vinegar, it tastes like wine. Chola, we treat it like vinegar. So which one is it? You can't have both ways. Says the Gemara. We're talking about a case like Yishtaka Chola Sitpatka. When you open it up at the very end, and the vinegar, there's the vinegar, and then there's very strong vinegar. And it takes 3 days from normal state of vinegar to become to this state of being very strong vinegar, so acidy. And therefore, really, if the taste is, if it tastes like wine, it's wine. I don't care about the smell. So therefore, the first 3 days is definitely good. The last 3 days, why it's terribly bad is because we're talking about a case we opened it up and the vinegar was mamish so strong and so intense that we knew that 3 days ago, it was already vinegar, you didn't even taste the wine. It's all about the taste. If it wouldn't have been that 3 days ago already became vinegar, it wouldn't be in this state 3 days later. So therefore, according to the Romans, Rabbi Shimon Levi agrees Rabbi Yochanan, like Rabbi Yehuda, that it's a taste of wine that matters. So Gemara concludes. So which ones Rabbi Yosef agreed? Rabbi Yosef quoted this brisa, and we asked him, so who do you agree with? The Shahakal like Rab Chizda or the Bar Guffin, because it's the taste that counts. So the Gemara, command partially. So who does Rabbi Yosef follow? So that itself, Pligi Bar Rab Mari Rab Zvi. Rab Mari didn't argue. Chad Amar Rab Yechlan, that what it's the taste that makes a Bar Guffin. The Chad Amar Rab Shimon Levi. Almost like Shimon Levi, that it's the smell, and the smell of vinegar, that it's vinegar.